Welcome back to the Legislative History series. In this video, we'll go over strategies for finding compiled legislative histories. If you can find a pre-compiled legislative history, it makes your task so much easier. We'll start out by watching a short clip that provides an overview of the process. Okay, I know that's a lot of information we went over in a short period of time, but we'll now go over each topic in more detail. Also, you should know that if you have any questions about the matters we're discussing here, you're welcome to call, email, or stop by the reference desk. Okay, let's move on. As the video pointed out, your first step in locating a compiled legislative history is to establish if you're working with a federal or state statute. That provides you with some context and helps determine the best way to find your history, so figure that out as your first step. Doing that also helps you calculate how much time the project might take. Federal statutes are generally easier to research than California statutes because they have more thorough documentation and are more easily available online. Compiled California legislative histories can be difficult to track down. This is because the documents that go into a legislative history aren't maintained in as consistent a manner in California as they are at the federal level, so you need to work harder to locate them. We'll go over some strategies and shortcuts for this in a few minutes. You've been provided with a citation to a federal statute and are told to look for the legislative history. Help! Here's what to do. First, you're going to look for the statutes at large or public law citation. And a quick note about citations. So when you're looking for a federal legislative history, you'll probably start out with a citation to the United States Code. This can be one of three versions: the official United States Code, commonly abbreviated as USC, the United States Code Annotated, which is the text of the original one with annotations. That means that there's sort of just footnotes referring to different secondary sources or cases or regulations that further went into detail about the statutory language. And then there's United States Code Service published by Lexis. So United States Code Annotated, USCA, and USCS have the same text as the United States Code. The general statutory language is the same, but USCA and USCS have added annotations that provide a little bit more detail and context about the code section. You have a citation if it's to United States Code, USCA, or USCS. By the way, all these different versions of the codes are keyed to each other, so it's not as if you need to look at one up in USCA and another one up in USCS, another one up in the official code. Once you have the citation, you have the same language of the code section will hold true for the United States Code Official one, the United States Code Annotated, and the United States Code Service. Your first order of business, and when you look at the code section, is to go ahead and look it up on Lexis, Westlaw, or online. What you're looking for at the bottom of the code section is a little subsection that will have more information about when the bill was passed. So it has this long string of citations. Once you read the statutory language in your code section, you're going to scroll further down. And below that, you're going to see a little subsection. This section is called Different Things on Different Platforms. It's called History on Lexis. It's called the Credits section on Westlaw. And if you look up your code section on Cornell's LII, if you just look it up online, it will be called the Source section. And under that, you're going to see different parallel citations for your code section. What you're going to be looking for with a federal legislative history is the public law number. Remember that the public law number is a citation to the bill that created or amended your code section. The public law number will be made up of two numbers. The first one is the congressional session number, and the second is the chronological number of the bill as it passed. The abbreviation you're looking for will either be pub period L period, or it might just say PL. So you're going to make a note of that at this point. Step 3. You're going to check to see if somebody has already published a legislative history on your topic. One way is to go to Sources of a Compiled Legislative History by Nancy Johnson. That's available on Hein Online, and to get to that, you just go to the library databases page and scroll down to Hein. Source that I think is terrific for looking up legislative history is ProQuest Legislative Insight. These have a ton of federal legislative histories, so it should ideally be a sort of one-stop shop for you. By way of background, this service was once owned by Lexis a couple years ago and was later sold to ProQuest. As a Loyola Law School student, you have access to the service through Rain's library. The great thing is that this service is both available to you now and also in the future through the library databases page. Here's how to locate a federal legislative history. Go to the library's webpage and click on Databases. This brings up all the library license databases. The list is arranged alphabetically. Just scroll down to ProQuest Legislative Insight. You'll notice that there's ProQuest Legislative Insight and also ProQuest Congressional. You may be wondering what the difference is between them. ProQuest Legislative Insight has compiled legislative histories. ProQuest Congressional has the individual documents that make up the legislative history, so you can search for them individually. Once you're on the Legislative Insight page, you'll see that there are a variety of ways to search for your history. But the United States Code citation, which is the most commonly used one in legal writing and in secondary sources, is not there. So what you need here is the public law citation, which fortunately you wrote down on the last step. You use that public law citation and you can pull up your statute. Now, quick note here. What if you just have the popular name for a statute? For example, you're looking for the Patriot Act. You can search using the popular name table if your statute has a popular name. That being said, my general advice here is to use the public law number for the best results, because not all statutes have popular names. The other thing is that you could put in a popular name and be misdirected to another statute that's similar. Using the public law citation allows you to know that you're in the correct location. So once you do that, you should locate your federal legislative history. Let's go ahead and open it up. When you're looking at the legislative history as a whole, you'll see a number of documents reflecting different stages of the legislative process. Your eyes may glaze over. A full legislative history can go on for hundreds of pages or extend over 1,000 pages. The compiled documents in print can resemble a telephone book. So many resources, so many versions, so many votes and histories and amendments, it's hard to know where to begin. The same thing can happen when you're looking at a legislative history online. It's hard to know where to go. One helpful thing to keep in mind here is that generally the courts consider some of the documents created in the legislative process as being much more probative than other documents. This allows you to focus your research a little bit. The documents that are viewed as being the most indicative of legislative intent are different versions of a bill and committee reports. Let's look at these in detail for a moment and discuss why each one is relevant. First, just as a practical matter, it's difficult to guess at legislative intent when passing a bill. There are many legislators who vote on any given bill, and each may have different beliefs or interpretations as they pass it. Then, what we're trying to do is to find something even more difficult than that, to assess the mindset of the legislative body passing the bill as a whole. One way courts assess the intent of the legislative body as a whole is to look at different versions of the bill. This gives them a sort of behind the scenes at what the legislators thought should be included and what legislators thought should be excluded as the bill progressed. It's also worth looking at the committee reports for a bill. You may remember from your civics class that right after a bill is introduced, it's referred to a relevant committee. To get the bill voted out of committee is a major stumbling block for most legislation. Let's say our bill is successful enough to be reported out of committee. Yay! So if your bill is reported out of committee, the committee will produce a report stating information about the bill. This information is crucial because it's a statement of the aims of the bill by those individuals who decided that the bill was worthwhile enough to be sent along with the hopes of becoming a law. So far, we know that committee reports in different versions of a bill are considered highly probative evidence of legislative intent. Step 5. Reading the documents you've discovered. To do a sort of quick legislative history, one of the most effective and efficient ways to do so is to go ahead and read through the different versions of the bills and through the committee reports. This allows you to focus on those important areas. You're going to want to compare the different versions of the bills. One thing that can be helpful here is that if your opponent is arguing for a specific interpretation of a code section, it can be super helpful to find in the legislative history that a given path, especially one that your opponent is presenting as being the legislative intent, was actually considered and then discarded by the legislative body considering it, whether it's the committee or whether it's language that was included at one point and then disappears from a later draft. That is a great goal. At this point, you can put together the different resources you have, compare them, and formulate a pretty clear idea of the legislative intent, seeing if it is helpful to your case and which portions might be most helpful. This concludes video 2. Our next video will look at how to do a California legislative history.